The misconception. The Galactic Assembly Hall of Proxima Station buzzed with the chatter of 17 different species. Light from the nearby star filtered through the crystalline dome, casting rainbow patterns across the polished obsidian floor. Ambassador Ilara Chen stepped through the main entrance, straightening her formal blue uniform as the murmurs shifted focus to her arrival. "The human representative has arrived," announced the Juxian attendant, their translucent skin pulsing with light patterns of formality. Ilara nodded respectfully, maintaining the practiced diplomat's smile she perfected over 15 years of interstellar service. At 42, she was considered mid-career by human standards. But she knew how the assembly viewed her kind. "Ah, the infant species sends its young again," rumbled High Minister Kralvox of the Duran Confederacy, his armored exoskeleton clicking as he gestured toward her. "Tell me, Ambassador Chen, did your handlers prepare you adequately for today's session?" Ilara had expected this. The Duran lived approximately 35 Earth years, but they emerged from their spawning ponds as fully formed adults with complete knowledge transfer from their progenitors. To them, humans were tragic accidents of evolution, born decades too early, helpless and ignorant, forced to waste precious years learning what other species knew instinctively. "My experience is sufficient, High Minister," she replied, taking her seat at the circular table. "I've represented Earth's interests in this assembly for longer than the average Duran lifespan." A ripple of discomfort passed through the gathering. The Viren delegate, an ancient crystalline entity named Shrix, rotated their perception facets toward her. "You speak of time as though it favors your kind, Ambassador. An unusual perspective from a species born incomplete." The Assembly's agenda today concerned the standard regulatory updates and trade negotiations that kept the peace among the 37 recognized spacefaring civilizations. But Ilara had come with additional authorization from Earth's central government, a revelation that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. When her turn came to address the Assembly, Ilara activated her datapad and projected a simple timeline into the center of the chamber. "Distinguished representatives, I present to you the Longevity Comparison Index that Earth has compiled with your cooperation over the past 3 decades. The projection showed lifelines of various species, color-coded and scaled proportionally. The Juxian line glowed green at 22 years. The Durans appeared in orange at 35. The crystalline Viren stretched impressively to 75. But one line continued far past the others, extending in steady blue to 120 years. This, Ilara said calmly, is the average human lifespan." The chamber erupted. Several translation systems struggled to keep pace with the outbursts. "Falsification," bellowed Kralvox. "Impossible," chittered the Raxus delegation. Shrix of the Viren simply dimmed their luminescence in what Ilara recognized as their expression of shock. Grand Minister Lorix, the Aphian who chaired the assembly, raised all 4 of her limbs for silence. "Ambassador Chen, these figures contradict established biological understanding. Your species gestates incompletely. Your infants require years of care. Your development is inefficient and prolonged. These are not traits of a long-lived species." Ilara nodded. "By your understanding, yes. But what you've interpreted as evolutionary flaws are actually adaptations that serve our longevity. Our extended childhood allows our neural pathways to develop in response to our environment rather than being predetermined. Our delayed maturation permits our bodies to invest energy in cellular repair mechanisms rather than rapid growth." She advanced the display to show medical scans comparing tissue regeneration rates across species. "What you see as incompleteness, we experience as plasticity, the capacity to change, to heal, to adapt." The Thraxi representative, a methane breather whose containment suit hummed quietly, leaned forward. "If these figures are accurate, then most humans outlive multiple generations of our kind." "Yes," Ilara confirmed. "I have personally negotiated with 3 successive Thraxi delegations." The implications settled over the assembly like a heavy fog. Species that had dismissed humans as fragile and unfinished now faced the reality that these same humans would witness the rise and fall of their governments, their dynasties, perhaps even their civilizations. "Why reveal this now?" asked Lorix, her voice carrying the subtle harmonics of suspicion. "Because the Arcturian system is failing," Ilara replied, bringing up a new projection showing a cluster of stars surrounded by alarming red indicators. Their sun is destabilizing decades ahead of projections. 3 billion lives across 4 species face extinction unless immediate action is taken. Shrix rotated slowly. "The Arcturian situation is regrettable but manageable. Standard evacuation protocols will take 40 years to complete," Ilara interrupted. "Most of you have delegated the problem to future generations of your kind. But humans will still be here, dealing with the consequences of decisions made today. We are proposing an alternative solution." The human plan was bold. A massive engineering project to stabilize the Arcturian star using technology that Earth had been developing quietly for decades. It would require resources from across the assembly worlds and unprecedented cooperation. "Impossible," declared Kralvox. "Such technology is theoretical at best." "We've been testing prototypes for 15 years, Ilara countered, while 3 generations of Duran representatives dismissed the Arcturian problem as someone else's future concern. Her words struck like physical blows. The assembly fell silent as representatives processed the implications. Humans weren't just announcing their longevity. They were demonstrating the perspective it granted them, the ability to plan and work across timeframes that most species considered beyond practical consideration. Grand Minister Lorix finally broke the silence. "Ambassador Chen, your revelation is disturbing. You suggest that humans have been patiently watching us cycle through generations, maintaining consistent policies while our representatives change." "We've been learning," Ilara corrected gently, "adapting to your rhythms. But now the Arcturian crisis forces us to reveal our perspective. We need your cooperation, but we also offer something unprecedented: continuity." What followed was the most contentious assembly session in recent memory. Species that had barely tolerated humans as oddities now regarded them with newfound wariness. Yet, as the technical details of Earth's Arcturian stabilization plan emerged, even the most skeptical representatives couldn't dismiss its viability. As the session concluded, Shrix of the Viren approached Ilara in the antechamber, crystal facets glowing with subdued light. "I have served in this assembly for 63 years, the ancient being communicated. I have seen 12 Duran High Ministers, 9 Thraxi delegations, and 7 Grand Ministers. Throughout, you humans have remained consistent. I mistook this for simplicity. I now recognize it as persistence." Ilara smiled. "We're accustomed to being underestimated, Elder Shrix. A tactical advantage, perhaps." The crystalline being's facets shifted, and what Ilara had learned was their version of thoughtful consideration. "I shall support your Arcturian initiative, Ambassador. And I find myself curious about what else your kind has been patiently developing while the rest of us treated you as evolutionary accidents." "Time will tell," Ilara replied, knowing that for humans, time had always been both their challenge and their greatest resource. As the assembly adjourned to consider Earth's proposal, a new understanding began to take shape among the gathered species. The humans, those strange, soft creatures born too soon and developing too slowly, had been quietly outlasting them all. What other surprises might be waiting in the creche that was Earth? The first cracks in the galaxy's misconception had formed, and humans, as they always had, would have the time to see what grew from those cracks. The revelation. 78 years later, Admiral Ilara Chen stood before the memorial wall aboard Proxima Station, her weathered hand tracing the names of former assembly representatives. At 120, she was now the longest-serving human diplomat in the Galactic Assembly, her once black hair now entirely silver, face marked with the dignified lines of age. Yet her posture remained straight, her mind sharp. Medical advances had extended human lifespans, even further since her first assembly appearance. Contemplating history, Admiral. The voice belonged to Tessix, third-generation descendant of Shrix, their crystalline structure showing the distinctive patterns of the Viren diplomatic lineage. Remembering colleagues, Ilara corrected. I was there when most of these names were added. For 7 decades, the truth about human longevity had reshaped galactic politics. Some species had responded with respect, others with suspicion and even fear. Humans had become the institutional memory of the Assembly, the ones who remembered agreements made generations ago, who maintained relationships across the rise and fall of governments. The emergency session will begin shortly, Tessix said. The Void Scourge reports are troubling. The Void Scourge had emerged 5 years earlier. A fungal entity had consumed sentient neural tissue, spreading across trade routes with terrifying efficiency. 11 worlds had already fallen, their populations reduced to mindless hosts that served only to spread the infection further. I've seen the reports, Ilara nodded grimly. This will be the 4th major crisis I've witnessed in my service. The Arcturian destabilization, the Raxus Plague, the Thraxi Civil War, and now this. The difference, Tessix observed, facets dimming, is that those previous crises affected individual sectors. The Void Scourge threatens everyone. In the Assembly Chamber, representatives from 32 surviving civilizations gathered in a mood of unprecedented gravity. Many species were now facing extinction-level threats, their shorter generations providing no defense against the Scourge's inexorable spread. Grand Archon Pelvox of the Durin, great-granddaughter of Kralvox, whom Ilara had faced in her first assembly, called the session to order. The Void Scourge has reached the outer colonies of 15-member worlds, she announced, her exoskeleton bearing the red markings of crisis authority. Containment protocols have failed. Conventional weapons are ineffective. We face a threat unprecedented in the Assembly's history. Ilara listened as representatives detailed failed responses and mounting casualties. The pattern was familiar. Short-lived species struggled with crisis continuity. Each new generation of leaders tried different approaches, abandoning promising strategies before they could yield results, losing institutional knowledge with each transition. When her turn came to address the Assembly, Ilara rose slowly, the silence deepening as the representatives regarded the human who had outlived most of their civilization's recent history. Distinguished representatives, she began, her voice carrying the weight of the century's experience. Earth has been preparing for this moment since the first Void Scourge report reached us 5 years ago. Not because we possess greater intelligence or resources, but because we possess continuity. She activated the central display, showing a complex molecular diagram. This is Project Mnemosyne, named after an ancient Earth deity of memory. It is not a weapon but a shield, a neural prophylactic developed across 3 generations of human scientists working in unbroken succession. The display shifted to show clinical trials, infection rates dropping to 0 as the treatment was applied. The Void Scourge targets neural pathways formed during rapid development, the kind most galactic species experience. Human neural development occurs gradually over decades, making us naturally resistant. We've engineered this resistance into a transmissible form. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Hope, skepticism, desperation, all mingled in the reactions. How quickly can this be deployed? Demanded the Thraxi representative. Production facilities have been operating at capacity for 2 years, Ilara replied calmly. We began manufacturing while most member worlds were still debating whether the threat was real. The revelation stunned the Assembly into silence, while shorter-lived species had cycled through denial, panic, and disjointed responses. Humans had been methodically developing, testing, and producing a solution across multiple changes in leadership on other worlds. Why were we not informed? Pelvox demanded, mandibles clicking in agitation. Ilara met the Durin leader's compound eyes steadily. Because 78 years ago, when I first stood in this chamber, the Galactic Assembly passed Resolution 147, requiring Earth to submit all long-term planning initiatives for multi-species approval before implementation. She brought up the historical record, displaying the resolution that had been enacted when the galaxy first realized how humanity's lifespan granted them strategic advantages. This resolution has been renewed by 17 successive assemblies, each time with stronger restrictions. It was intended to prevent humans from exploiting our longevity for political advantage. Instead, it created bureaucratic barriers that would have delayed Project Mnemosyne until most of your worlds had fallen. The chamber erupted in chaotic debate. Accusations of treaty violations clashed with desperate pleas for immediate deployment of the human solution. Tessix's crystalline form glowed with rare brightness as they addressed their fellow representatives. I have reviewed our archives. When the Arcturian crisis threatened 4 species with extinction, humanity shared their stellar stabilization technology without reservation. When the Raxus plague decimated our trading partners, human medical teams remained on infected worlds while other species retreated. Throughout our shared history, humans have demonstrated one consistent trait. They remain present while the rest of us come and go. The ancient Virn turned their perception facets toward Ilara. We feared their persistence because we could not match it. Perhaps instead we should have recognized it as commitment. Grand Archon Pelvox struggled visibly with the implications. Her species had gone through 4 complete generational turnovers since Ilara first addressed the assembly. The Durin have a saying, she finally stated, her translator conveying the formal cadence of an ancient aphorism. The slow-growing tree outlasts the mountain. She turned to face Ilara directly. We have misunderstood your kind, Admiral Chen. We saw your prolonged development as weakness when it was, in fact, your path to outlasting us all. Within hours, the Assembly unanimously approved immediate deployment of Project Mnemosyne. Human ships that had been waiting at strategic positions throughout the galaxy launched their missions to distribute the neural prophylactic. 3 months later, as infection rates began to plateau and then decline, Ilara stood in her private quarters aboard Proxima Station, watching stars through the viewport. A gentle chime announced a visitor. Commander Jai Patel, her great-grandson and aide. Admiral, he said, offering a datapad, the final reports from the outer colonies. The Void Scourge has been contained on all 37 affected worlds. Recovery operations are underway. Ilara accepted the pad with a nod. And assembly reaction? Mixed, Jai replied with a wry smile. Relief, gratitude, and the beginning of suspicion about what else we might have been developing without oversight. The cycle continues, Ilara murmured. There's something else, Jai added. The Assembly has proposed a new position, Galactic Archivist, a permanent role responsible for maintaining historical continuity across member species' governmental transitions. Let me guess, Ilara said, her eyes crinkling with amusement. They want a human. They're insisting on it, Jai confirmed. The nomination has your name on it, Admiral. Ilara turned back to the viewport, considering the irony. For centuries, humans had been mocked as the unfinished species, born too early and developing too slowly. Now, those same traits had positioned them as the memory keepers of the galaxy, the ones who remained while others passed into history. Tell the Assembly I'll consider their proposal, she said finally. But first, I need to complete my memoirs. There are lessons from these past 100 years that future generations, both human and otherwise, would do well to remember. As Jai departed, Ilara activated her personal journal. On the screen appeared the title she had chosen years earlier, when she first realized the unique position humans would come to hold in the galactic community. The day the galaxy discovered humans are born early and still outlive them, a century of interspecies relations. She began to type, knowing that unlike most galactic memoirs, hers would be read not just by descendants, but by the children and grandchildren of species who had once dismissed humanity as evolutionary failures. The greatest vindication was not triumph but endurance, and humans had mastered the art of lasting. Somewhere in the vast assembly archives, the original recording of her first appearance before the galactic representatives still existed. A young diplomat revealing the truth that would eventually reshape the power structures of known space, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through the simple, unstoppable power of being present, generation after generation, while others rose and fell around them. The galaxy had finally understood. Humans weren't born too early. They were born to last.